Welcome to the DRF Sports Podcast, brought to you by DRF Sports. America's most trusted name in horse racing is now providing sports bettors with exclusive data, analytics, previews, videos, and expert picks on all major sports. Bet smarter and have more fun doing it. It's the DRF Sports Podcast, and now your host, Sheldon Alexander. Ready, set, bet.
This is the DRF Sports Podcast, episode 46. Make sure you like and follow wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Sheldon Alexander, and I'm still a little sore and a bit banged up from losing the wisdom teeth. The voice is slowly making its way back because I can open my mouth up a little bit more, stitches and stuff. Sorry, too much information. But yet, somehow I still think I'm feeling better than my man's Jimmy G. Either way, we're coming off a 1-1 record on championship weekend, bringing the overall playoff record to 9-3, which is not bad. I'll take that. With just one game left, which is the Super Bowl. That just sounds so crazy considering how long this season has been, but yet here we are. More on that in a second, but first, be a pro and win with DRF Sports Pro. Introducing DRF Sports' all-new premium data feature on drf.com/sports. For $99 a year, which is just $8.25 a month, you can get industry-leading betting trends, angles, and analytics. With the playoffs here, it's the best way for you to make some money this postseason and have fun while doing it. That's DRF Sports Pro. Sign up now at drf.com/sports. And hopefully, we have kept our pro picks up as well. As mentioned, 9-3 during the playoffs. Against the spread, we will take that. We do this podcast twice a week. On Tuesdays, we recap the week that was. Fridays, it's a picks pod. Obviously, today's Tuesday. We got championship weekend to talk about. What was going on with Patty Mahomes? That was one of the worst choke jobs. See, I'm getting fired up. I need Matt Russell to help me out because I'm still a little rattled from watching what Patty Mahomes did. Maybe I need some explanation. And luckily, Mr. Matt Russell can help me out with that. And that starts right about now. So I'm still a little torn up about my Niners, but they covered a 3.5 points, giving us a 1-1 championship weekend. I'll take that, bringing the total to 9-3 during the playoffs, heading into the Super Bowl. Plus the props keep cashing thanks to this man, Mr. Matt Russell. How you doing after championship weekend, my dude?
Yeah, a little sad. Not because, the results were necessarily all that bad, right? A little bit of a rough scene when it comes to, we had our little plan there with the Chiefs to just win the game, gentlemen. And then we had our little tiered plan there where we're hoping to get the 49ers with the win, get our money line parlay rollover home. Okay, that didn't work out. Like you mentioned, at least we got the cover. But of course, we couldn't get the back end of the teaser because there was no back end of the teaser to be had because of the Chiefs. So not even really that mad about that because like you mentioned, it's been a really good playoff. I'm just kind of upset season's over, right? For me, the Super Bowl is a more social event, right? It's okay. Let's, hopefully be able to go to a party gathering, get the chicken wings going, the nachos and all sorts of delights. And like this past weekend was that last one where it was like, okay, I'm sitting down at home, by myself or with minimal distractions and just able to enjoy quote unquote football for what it is, right? Whereas the Super Bowl, the halftime show's going where, we got a prop pool going, all of that fun stuff, but it's like, it's not what we're used to, right? It's not every Sunday going through the ritual of pouring over the board. Okay, like what are our money line bets here? What are our teaser plays? What is the best value? Okay, a handful of props. And then you just get inundated with all that action. We're going to have a ton of action for the Super Bowl. Don't get me wrong, but it is, as they say, as the kids say, it just kind of hits different. And so, for by and large, the season is essentially over, except for really the party at this point.
There's tons of time for us to get to that for sure. Yeah. But what we would like to do here, we'll get to that. Like we're going to talk a little bit about what's going to happen, some of the early bets, some of the early lines we can look at for the Super Bowl, some of the early props maybe that might be available for the Super Bowl. We'll do that at the end of this show. Obviously, full on deep dives coming in future episodes for sure. We got to start with where we came from this weekend. And there's a game in which the Cincinnati Bengals, if we're being honest, I very much think that there weren't many people other than maybe close friends and family of the Cincinnati Bengals, and even still maybe just the players, media people who were trying to do the thing where it's like, I'm going to pick the upset just because nobody else is. But my point here is very few people had the Bengals winning this game, right? Very few people. Chiefs are favored by 7, floated 7.5, back down to 7 by the time the game starts. And I'm going to get this out of the way. Okay. I'm going to get this out of the way right off the top. A lot of what I'm going to say is not about me betting on the Chiefs, right? Because cool, we win games, we lose games. It's been a great season. It's been a great playoffs. Trust me, like the account is nice right now. So this isn't about losing a bet on the Chiefs, right?
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest choke jobs I have ever seen in the history of sports. And I feel like the Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy and company are almost getting a bit of a slide because people like the Bengals and you want to cheer for the Bengals and Joe Burrow's got cool memes. And so they win 27-24 and it's such a great story. But that was a pathetic loss. And from a gambling standpoint, as you mentioned, crushing teasers across the world, crushing all types of like in-game bets. I was like, all right, cool. But just off that vibe alone, we'll start here, right? That's not a loss that me as a gambler I'm mad at in terms of a gambling perspective, because I would make that bet again 10 times out of 10. That's just me. What did you think about that game as you look at it and the Bengals win 27-24 in OT?
So like you make a bet and you're wrong within the bet. And like when in your case, you were, and it's not really any different, right? You're on the point spread -7, -7.5. Yeah. And we'll refer back to the tweet where like you're feeling really good. You're feeling really good about it. And the reason I would refer back to that is because like that existed, right? Like that feeling wasn't crazy in that moment. Like you're up 21-3, 21-10, 21-10 with the ball inside the 5-yard line. There's no resistance whatsoever from the Bengals defense. Like all of that happened. And so, whether you're wrong about the point spread at -7, or you're wrong about betting the money line at -330, or you're wrong about betting the alternative spread at -1, -1.5, at -270, right? Those things are all equally wrong. Yeah, the game went to overtime. So technically the person, like myself, who just needed the Chiefs to win was closer to theoretically being right. But because the price I paid for the Chiefs to win that game, right, was so high, right? Like I was really wrong from that standpoint, right? Because that's a game that I was, apparently we were wrong by, listen, it was a -110 on either side at one point in that game. And I'm sitting there with a -270, 275 ticket on the Chiefs to win the game. And, so we're both wrong, but it sounds like we're slighting the Bengals, but the Bengals are what they are. They are a, above average team that was looking to get blown out until the end of the first half and Andy Reid admits like, oh, I probably called the wrong play. Like how many years in the league do you have to be? How much experience do you have to have for you to not call the wrong play there? I mean, we fast forward to the fourth quarter, it's like 2nd and goal with the other team without any timeouts. And you get cute and you run a play action pass that essentially forces Patrick Mahomes to get sacked. And what I mean by that is with the time that was left on the clock and they run on first down. So they, Cincinnati uses their last timeout. And the whole point of running on first down so that Cincinnati uses their last timeout is obviously so that they can take the clock down if they fail on the next play. But the next play has to be a run play. Has to. Doesn't have to work. Right? Just can't be can't be a loss of yardage, and it can't be an incomplete pass. And they run a play action pass. And Mahomes at that point, who knows that I'm not going to say it's the worst case scenario if he throws an incomplete pass, but like he knows that if he throws an incomplete pass, the clock is going to stop. So, obviously that's going to leave more time for the Bengals. And by the way, this isn't like the Bills needing to run the clock out against the Chiefs. This isn't even again, the Bengals needing to run the clock out against the Chiefs. We're talking about being worried about Joe Burrow with what would in theory be a 4-point lead, right? You're down 3, you score a touchdown, you go up 4 points. Like, score the touchdown. And you know what I mean? And with 55 seconds or whatever was left, and like take your chances that Burrow can't go 75 yards without any timeouts. Like, it all kind of got a little too cute towards the end there. But if you're going to go the too cute route, you have to run the football there and at least take time off the clock and have a 3rd and goal from the 3 to 1 yard line, instead of forcing Patrick Mahomes to go, I can't throw an incomplete pass, I can't throw this ball away because it stops the clock. Okay, I'll just have to take a sack here and live to see 3rd down. Then 3rd down, of course, now you have to throw, and you have to throw from a deficit type of a position where the pass rush knows what you're going to do. And now he's running for his life back there doing his pirouette routine, and he drops the ball on the ground, right? And listen, we didn't really talk that much about the interception that he threw earlier on, right? That was a total choke throw where he throws it directly to the opposing team. Like, you can't get any chokier than that. And that game was almost over. That game was 1 yard, like one defensive player from jumping on that fumble away from being over before they even got a field goal attempt off. Imagine that had happened. I mean, if that had happened, I think we would probably be talking even more about the Chiefs choking it away and even a little bit less about the Bengals. But the Bengals are the team that advanced, and so they go to the Super Bowl. And, that's the team that we now focus on going forward because they stay alive. And that's essentially what they've done all playoff long. And that's part of the sport, right? We talked about the 49ers getting away with one, if you will, in Green Bay without ever having to score an offensive touchdown. And sort of the beauty of football being like, yeah, you can win with special teams, you can win with defense. And in the case of the Bengals, you can win by just surviving. And the fact that, they go into halftime and they make those changes, and that Reed and Bieniemy and, to you can equal extent, Mahomes have absolutely no answers in the second half. For the second time, by the way. Like, it was eerie how both those games played out very similarly to the previous matchups with both of those teams, right? The Chiefs having the big literal 11-point lead, same second half, halftime lead as they did the first time around in week 17. And they choke it both times because they weren't able to score in the second half. Now, I'm not smart enough. I know that they dropped 8 guys and that sort of thing. And that's how they sort of foiled the Chiefs in the second half of the AFC Championship game. But if that's the same thing that they did back in week 17, and the Chiefs had already seen it, they'd already seen the adjustments, how awful is that from a coaching standpoint, that you had like a practice game knowing what the Bengals were capable of the first time around, and you still blew it the second time around? Like, that's the thing that's most incredible to me, is that they had practice on this exact game situation. And you can sort of, they took their foot off the gas pedal or whatever these cliches were, but they had to know as soon as that first drive failed for the Chiefs in the second half, that was an absolute ball game at that point. Right? Like, I'm sure you were probably sitting there going like, oh man, we're not going to cover this game. And I don't know that we were, I wasn't certainly live betting the Bengals on the money line at that point, but like, yeah, you could feel, everything sort of go, oh man, like the Bengals now have some belief. Now, would they be able to execute, all of that sort of stuff? Who knows, right? You play that game a bunch of different times. Who knows if it goes differently? But the point is, they've played it twice now, and the game has gone basically the exact same way in each game. And that's an indictment of the Chiefs coaching staff.
Yeah, I just think that at the end of the day, I look at that game and I just think simply, you're the Chiefs, you're already crowning yourself. It was kind of the theme of the whole season, where when their season was going bad, it was just Patrick Mahomes and company doing too much, right? Not taking the base level plays needed to just take what was in front of them and win the game or make the basic play. It was always trying to make that extra, crazy play or extra, take the extra long look to force a play in there. And it was just not necessary. And when you look at it from a standpoint of, you're up 21-3, right? You give up the halftime, right? You don't get any points at halftime. Cool. You come out in the second half, you don't score. Cool. You score 3 points in the whole second half, then add in the interceptions, then add in the near fumble, like all of these things. Yes, Joe Burrow and company did what they needed to do to accept said victory.
Yeah.
But that's an epic, epic, epic loss. And if that game happened to, like, I don't know who could have been in, like, let's say that was the Titans, you know, just a team that wasn't universally loved, right? Like Tannehill's not out here, you know, with cool nicknames and rock and gold chains and memes that everyone can share, right? Yeah. So if you replace that, and now this is the, like, it's just amazing to me how bad that performance was for Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, that's an abomination of a loss. And I just think, you know, you look at that and you think, what's next for the Chiefs? Because here's the thing, right? We can say you blow the game, you don't go to the Super Bowl, cool. But how many years in a row are you going to have at this when you know, okay, the Bengals are here, you know, the Chargers should be able to figure something out at some point. The Bills, you just barely beat anyways. Like, there's just so many teams that are just there already and waiting in the wings. And you're just wasting away, as you mentioned, doing pirouettes, right? And, like, what? It is just a weird performance. And I know Bill Simmons has a lot of crazy things, but when he brought up, like, was Patrick Mahomes concussed? Not even making a joke. When he said that, I was like, oh, I mean, that would actually explain a lot, because I just don't understand. Like, there's no rhyme or reason as to what he was doing other than just doing too much.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you blame him for that interception because that's an unforced error, right? To borrow a term from another sport. But like the pirouette
but you can't
stuff,
throw to Tyreek Hill. You can't do that. You can't be doing the pirouette stuff in the pocket. Like, you those are just things that make no sense. Throw the ball away.
No, for sure. But here's the thing, like, when the pirouette stuff works as often as it does, that becomes part of the magic, right? And that's why, like, Patrick Mahomes, if you call him the best quarterback in the league, he's not the best quarterback in the league because he just stands in the pocket and zips it around, right? He's the best quarterback in the league because he does these off-platform, as they say, throws, right? Which sometimes require these spin moves to get out of the pocket. Like, yeah, maybe maybe he could do it without the spin move, but whatever, if that's working for him, and it was working for him to get away from the defenders. But the point is, for me, is like, okay, but where are the easy throws, right? Because sometimes it looks so easy throwing to Travis Kelce, right? Where it's like easy 7 yards, and then maybe Travis Kelce turns it into 14 yards because he just barrel rolls over somebody. And it looks so easy sometimes. You're like, well, how can this offense be stopped? Like, why aren't you, like, how are you not covering Kelce in that situation, right? Like, it feels like the defense is just ignoring, you know, one of the best players on the team sometimes. And then there are times where, like, they are just covered the whole time because everybody is like gone deep essentially, right? And there isn't that like easy one. And to me, that's
and you could just run the ball.
And by the way, yes, you also could just run the ball. And by the way, like, to just go back to that second down play, you know, down at the end of the game, like, where is all the like throwing the ball? I don't want Blake Bell running an option, but like, where's the shovel pass? Where's the Tyreek Hill, like, just running as hard as he possibly can, you know, in motion, and then handing it off to him, flipping it to him, throwing it to him in these short yardage situations that, like, I say you have to run the football there, right? But like, you could also run a really conservative pass in that situation as well, kind of like they did with no time left on the clock, ironically, in the first half, where it's like, yeah, we're going to complete this pass, the clock's going to keep running, and we're going to get it into one of our playmakers' hands, right? And they just assumed that the Bengals were going to sell out on a Jerick McKinnon run. And think about that, right? Like, the idea that, like, the Bengals were just going to, like, give it all up for a Jerick McKinnon run, a guy who wasn't even effectively on the team or sort of in a meaningful position on the team until 3 weeks ago, right? Like, it's just so crazy that, like, this is the position that they're in. And I think, again, it's fundamentally like, all right, if you're not going to make any adjustments to create easy throws, to create open receivers, right? How are throws to McKinnon not in the plan for the second half? just because one guy was shadowing him out of the backfield. Like, it was a lot of McKinnon sort of gets the fake on the sort of token play action, and then just kind of sachets over to the left side, and there's a linebacker over there. There's no like option route, like Darren Sproles style thing, where like McKinnon looks like the fastest guy in the field a lot of the time, right? Like, he looks like the quickest guy on the field, fresh legs, all of that sort of thing. Well, like, where's the play to get him open? Where's the play to get him one-on-one where Mahomes is actually looking at him as the first read? That Hill, Kelsey, all of these other guys are pushing the defense down the field. Okay, if you're going to do that, let's find something underneath. And that was the handicap going in, where we were like, man, they're going to use the underneath, stuff and be patient with things. And yeah, okay, Cincinnati drops 8 guys to fill that void. When they push the safeties back, now they have more guys underneath. But like, you got to be able to do more than what they were able to do. And so Mahomes is back there buying time because everybody's covered, not because Tyreek Hill can't theoretically get open, but because the coverage is such that it's almost impossible for him to do so. And so, like, come up with a better plan so that it doesn't get to the point where we end up getting frustrated, because, you're watching a football game and the way that it's shot is we don't know what's happening down the field, right? Anytime a quarterback throws the football and it's going out of frame for that brief second, you have that moment where you're like, oh, I don't know where this is going, or like whether it's going to be a wide open guy, whether it's going to be a covered guy, et cetera, et cetera. And so we don't know, right? I don't have looked at the all 22 to see some of the, these guys being covered. We get the dots out there on Twitter every once in a while to sort of see, like on this key play, was anybody open? And it's a little bit deceiving sometimes, because you go, okay, well, that guy was open, but then you look at the quarterback and he's, in the case of Mahomes, he's mid pirouette already, because by the way, the offensive line isn't doing all that much to protect him. And they've been able to sort of survive by that up until the Super Bowl against the Bucs, where the offensive line absolutely crumbled against a really good D-line. And so obviously I think we need to give a little bit more credit to the Bengals defensive line for inciting that pirouette, right? But it could have been a lot easier. And that comes down to just fundamental planning, adjustments, and what you have in your playbook. And they got a lot of fun, wacky plays for when they're up 30 points in the playbook. But where's the page of the playbook that when the other team drops 8 into coverage, what do we do there, right? And like, you can beat them up sometimes for running too much or running not enough, right? But like, when you have Patrick Mahomes, like, you're going to want him to throw the football, but there's just got to be better ways to get guys open and to take what the defense gives you, because every defense is going to give you something, right? And in the case of any team playing the Chiefs, it's always the underneath. We are going to give the Chiefs the underneath, but they just found themselves in 3rd and 4 way too often and just unable to convert, right? And so, the late throw, and this is a personnel thing, right? The late throw in overtime to Tyreek Hill, where it's like, yeah, he's not going to win a jump ball contest because that's just not what he does, right? You have a better chance of just throwing one 70 yards and hope he runs underneath it. And you have a better chance of throwing, he might be the best slot receiver of all time if they just kept him in the slot and had him run crosses, right? Because as we saw against the Bills, all it takes is a 5-yard catch for that guy oftentimes to turn it into something bigger. And so they don't have, imagine if they had a Mike Williams, for example, like one of these tall, high jumping type wide receivers, like that's the throw that you make. Now, again, the Bengals, we're not giving them enough credit. A great defensive play to create that interception. And of course, the overtime rule and the drama over the overtime rule sort of goes 1 week before we see a team lose despite winning the coin toss. And of course, Bills fans have to be kicking themselves from watching the Bengals be able to stop the Chiefs in that situation. But, again, we don't talk about it enough, I suppose, but like, kudos to the Bengals, the adjustments made, all of that sort of thing. But you can't blow a 21-3, a 21-10 when you have the ball inside the 5-yard line and another possession after that. You can't do it. I'm not even talking about the cover necessarily, but you can't lose that game. And that is just fundamentally the takeaway for me. That's an absolute all-time choke job by the Chiefs.
No, I'm totally okay to lose a bet from a team that was favored to win by 7. You blow a 2 touchdown lead. Like, listen, and the way that it happened, context has to matter. But absolutely. Again, everything else is totally cool, right? There are tons of props that were hit.
Yeah. Cut the
Travis
Kelce over, right? I mean, that goes right down to the handicap. It's like, okay, throw it underneath. And you saw like Kelce was locked in. That guy was going to not drop a ball, right? Like if his life depended on, you saw him like hands up, I am catching this, like he was locked in. And so like, I felt like, I don't know how he's not going to catch 15 balls today. And there would be just giant gaps of time where he didn't catch a ball. And it
you
just
have
felt
to want
like
to just take the check down.
Yeah. Right? And it just felt like they were getting greedy.
The check down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. But it's funny too, and we'll get to this in the next game as well, but this game kind of summed up the Chiefs season. If you think about it, we spent most of the season talking about Patrick Mahomes' decision-making, Patrick Mahomes not making the easy play, Patrick Mahomes trying to do too much and making mistakes. And that's literally what the game came down to. And he's just lucky that his O-lineman was able to recover that fumble right before the end of regulation, because that literally would have summed up the season and that game perfectly, right? But because the game continued and the way the Bengals were able to win it in overtime, so many other things happened that we forget the abomination that Patrick Mahomes was. And I know it sounds weird to say, right? Because we're not used to saying that, but that was bad. That was just horrible. But anyways, congrats to the Bengals. Bengals moving on to the Super Bowl. 27-24 OT win. What were they? 10-7 in the regular season, right? Like that's an incredible swing for the Cincinnati Bengals. I look forward to a full couple weeks of Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and their dads, memes, all that fun stuff. Here for it all. Congratulations. Let's talk about the NFC in a sec. But first, the reminder, as always, to ask you if you have checked out Cash Grab. Cash Grab is DRF Sports' all-new free-to-play sports prediction game where you can win real money. It's available to every sports fan in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Win real cash prizes every day, as well as a chance to win big money jackpots. All you have to do is download the free DRF Cash Grab app, create an account, and start predicting. Who will win the first quarter? How many touchdowns will Joe Burrow score in the second half? Answering questions like these will end in you making real money. So download the DRF Cash Grab app now and win big. I think that a question that I wanted to ask the DRF Cash Grab app is, how long could I really go before knowing that Jimmy Garoppolo was eventually going to let me down? Could the DRF Cash Grab app tell me that? That's what I want to know. But moving on to the NFC, Niners, Rams, spread was 3.5. This was a very important lesson. I was talking with one of my friends yesterday at work, and he was saying, it was so close. I had the Rams, and I'm like, the Rams, the 3.5. Like, this is exactly what we talk about. The half point.
Never made sense.
That's why it's there. That's legitimately why it's there. And it was there for me, the sad Niners fan. Who condolences. You lose that game but you're able to say, well, at least I bet a lot of money on the spread and like made some money back. Because you're trying to just cover up the fact that let's be serious about this game.
Yeah.
It was coaching malpractice by Kyle Shanahan, but par for the course. Levels. We've seen that before, right? And the image that will haunt me is Deebo Samuel crying on the sidelines, and then watching him walk to the locker room, and he's barely even making it before he keels over again, because that man left everything on the field, and you, Kyle Shanahan, decide on 4th and short, you're like, let's just punt. I don't understand that. I will never be able to understand that. I'm so confused. It's almost as if Kyle Shanahan was just trying to cover the spread, right? Like, I'm okay to just come. We got a lead. We're cool. And I'm being facetious here, people, obviously. But do you know what I'm saying? It's just like, are you just okay here? Like, the Niners were somehow up very comfortably in that game. Right. And all you got to do is just run the ball, kill the clock. And I was told that's what Shanahan does.
Yeah. Yeah, right? I was told by watching him for every game ever, basically, right? Like, that's the problem. It's one thing if you're asking your team to do something that they don't do in order to kill the clock, right? And that's how sort of the cliche of like, NFL, I got to run the football, got to be able to run the football, even though in 2021, right, we see these explosive pass offenses and off the charts yardage totals and all of that stuff. And it's like, yeah, okay, but when it absolutely comes down to it, you have to be able to run the football to close a football game out. And when you're built to run the football, these are the opportunities, not risks, even though obviously there's a risk inherent with all of this stuff. But these are opportunities to see your run game in action. And sometimes it's Kyle Juszczyk, like on a fullback dive, right? Like, yeah. What? Like with, Deebo Samuel, with Elijah Mitchell, with, by the way, Trey Lance standing there on the sideline. Like, how is there not a Trey Lance package for any sort of option run type of, get him out on the edge? Like, speaking of things I've been told that Trey Lance is a sort of generational athlete at the quarterback position. Like, that has to be the reason why you drafted him as high as you did, because it's certainly not quite yet for his throwing acumen. And so when you've got this laundry list, all right, it's not that different from the Chiefs, as you mentioned. When you have this laundry list, this whole thing of a play sheet, and oh yeah, we got a Travis Kelce throw here, we've got a Blake Bell option run on the San Francisco. It's like, oh, we have 47 different toss plays and 18 different misdirection off tackle plays, and we're going to run Kyle Juszczyk up the middle, and then we're just going to not punt, or we're not going to go for it on 4th and 2. Like, you can't get those yards. So we always talk about, coaches, do you know what game you're in? Do you know what team you have? And so if you build your team to be able to convert those, that's the danger of your team. That's the thing that the other team doesn't want to see you do, right? When you're able and capable of running the football on 3rd and 9 and getting those first downs, and you absolutely have to have those first downs, it has to be the same thing for 4th and 2. Now, you could say, well, Trent Williams is banged up, so they don't have that same confidence in the offensive line, all of those sorts of excuses or whatever. But here's the thing. I would like to, and listen, if you're new to the podcast, this might be fresh. Otherwise, you might want to just grab a shot glass and maybe pour one here. But I would like, at some point, my hope is that coaches not going for it in that situation gets treated eventually how coaches think they're going to be treated for going for it. And what that means is, right, we just spent, the entire existence of football going like, oh, you can't go for it on 4th down. And that's why coaches don't. Not because it's the right or wrong thing to do, because they don't want the heat. That's why they run the kicker out for the 57-yard field goal. And when the kicker misses the field goal, we blame the kicker for missing the field goal. We never say, oh, the coach should go for it. But we are slowly evolving as an NFL society here, right? Where we go, oh, maybe you should go for it on 4th and 1. And then now we sort of decided somewhere in the last 10 years, it's okay to go for it on 4th and 1, but only if it's in the certain position on the field, right? It can't be too close. It can't be too close to the end zone, because you'd be giving up the points. You'd be giving up the 3 points. Oh, we gotta take the points. And it can't be too close to your own end zone, because apparently people think in 2021 that punting and giving the ball to the other team, as we watch the Rams go 97 yards earlier on in the game for their touchdown, apparently we just decided that field position in 2021 actually matters. I'm here to tell you, it doesn't. It took 2 plays after they punt for the Rams to get the ball in that same position. How many games do we have to watch? How many times do we have to see this before we realize giving the ball to the other team, whether it's on the 40-yard line or the 4-yard line, is still giving the ball to the other team? But the problem is because the scales haven't tipped, right? And so if they go for it there and they fail, the internet is going to be upset. If they don't go for it, the internet is going to be upset, except for it's not the same internet, right? It's not the same people. If there's 1 million people on the internet, obviously there's a lot more, but if there's 1 million people on the internet and 500,000 of them are upset for you, about them not going for it, there's going to be 500,000 of those people who are upset that they did go for it, but they're only going to be upset if it fails, because everything is results oriented. And we're going to break down what the play was, on why that was a stupid play, and like this, that, and the third. The problem is that it used to be all 1 million of those people wanted you to punt. It was just it's decided, right? Like in the same way that we used to think the earth was flat. It was just decided that you have to punt there. Nobody ever sort of questioned it. And then we started doing some math on it. And we started realizing that this is a different game than was used to being played. I'm not saying it's better. I don't even really think it's better, but that's just me being old school, liking 90s and early 2000s style football. But the point is the recognition that the game has changed. And half of us have figured out that the game has changed. And so now we're sort of teetering on the brink here where half of the people are going to be mad and half of the people are going to be mad if the other decision gets made. If we could just get to a point where it's assumed that it's a 100 million, the all million people have decided you have to go for it, because we have all bought into the idea of giving the ball to the other team is a mistake, whether you do it via an interception, or whether you do it via a punt. Giving the ball to the other team is a mistake virtually 100% of the time. Now, again, I'm saying virtually because there's 4th and 15s and all of these sorts of things. And maybe you're on your own 10, 20 yard line. I don't advocate for that necessarily, right? Because again, we have the math, we have the charts. It's all widely available on the internet. But the point is, Kyle Shanahan is a coward because he doesn't want the heat. He doesn't want the smoke. He wants to keep his job. And if he goes for it there and they fail, maybe his owner, the York family of the 49ers, maybe they are one of those people who think you should punt there because they have been in football a long time and you just punt there and you trust your defense and all of that BS cliche old school nonsense. And those are the only people that he has to answer to, because those are the only people who decide whether he's employed. And everybody who's listening to this hopefully is employed, and they are going to make their decisions based on what their employer thinks is the appropriate decision, even if it's not necessarily the decision that they agree with, or necessarily the decision that is sort of fundamentally correct. And that's the end. That's the essential part here. What is fundamentally correct? And if we can get to a point where we realize that 4th and 2 from the other team's 40 yard line or so is fundamentally correct to go for it, and Kyle Shanahan doesn't have to worry about the backlash, then at that moment, we're going to finally reach football enlightenment here. By the way, Sean McVay on the other side is just absolutely handing out timeouts for no reason at all via absurd challenges. And it's that simple, right? If the 49ers win that game, and whether that's because they go for it on 4th or 2 or because Tart catches the interception, now we're looking at Sean McVay and going like, man, what are you doing with those challenges? What a clown, what a stooge. But now all of a sudden, Sean McVay is favored to win the Super Bowl. And what if he does win the Super Bowl? It all washes away. The Men in Black wand comes out like we did with Andy Reid. And now Sean McVay, for the next how many years, gets to keep making dumb decisions on challenges, gets to keep making dumb in-game decisions. People were roasting that guy for almost blowing the game against Tampa Bay last week with the play calling and whatnot. But he's this close to winning a Super Bowl. And if he doesn't, Zach Taylor wins a Super Bowl. Right? Yeah. So either Zach Taylor or Sean McVay gets scot-free for maybe the rest of their career, certainly for a few more years of being able to make dumb decisions with impunity. And that's sort of really kind of sad, right? That we just go, oh, you won a Super Bowl. You almost, McVay almost blew this last game. He almost blew the Buccaneers game, right? So alternative universe, there's a lot of different ways that this postseason could have gone that has Sean McVay sitting at home looking like a stooge for blowing these games. Now all of a sudden he's going to win the Super Bowl and it's not going to matter. Like, what? Like, we have to be smarter. And this is where the betting element comes in, right? Like, we can't just assume the Andy Reids of the world, because they've won a Super Bowl, are all of a sudden changed men. They've seen enlightenment. They know how to make late game decisions all of a sudden. And when McVay or Taylor win the Super Bowl, we have to have that same attitude. Okay, congrats on the Super Bowl. That's awesome. Fan base, all of that sort of thing. But when we're talking about point spreads next year, And some of these teams being overvalued, maybe that's the Rams, maybe that's the Bengals. Like, these are the things that create that overvaluing of these teams, when we know that if a couple of bounces go a different way, McVay's at home. In this case, Reed is at home again. Like, this is what we have to take away from these games, not who won, who lost, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, totally. I just think at the end of the day, the Niners were in a position to win that game. Obviously, the money line rollover was close, very close, so super close. They cover the spread as mentioned, and yeah, that game switches on not going for fourth down, the Tart drop followed by the penalty on the Beckham catch, and then the game, that's a huge swing right there, right? Game flips, and as soon as it happened, I was like, okay, you could see where this was going, because for me, as mentioned, I just knew at some point if the Niners were going to win, eventually it comes down to me sitting and relying on Jimmy Garoppolo to make plays. And that's just not a place where I want to be. And they didn't need to be in that position, right? But they ended up there at the end. Yeah. And that's when I knew, okay, this was a wrap. But huge shouts to the props. George Kittle hitting the anytime touchdown.
We finally got him there.
Hey, Kittle, Debo, just an absolute beast, like an absolute beast.
Do you think you mentioned maybe Shanahan had the plus the points facetiously? Do you think Debo had his own MVP ticket from the start of the playoffs, 85-1, right, like I did? Right. Where if that team gets to the Super Bowl, I think for the first time in our lifetime, we might see a quarterback as not the. I shouldn't say our lifetime, as if I know what happened in like 1987. But we might have had the one team's quarterback not a favorite, right? Like, you look at the MVP market right now, obviously, right? And Stafford and Burrow are the favorites for each team. Like, I think Debo might have been ahead of Garoppolo in the market for MVP, and he was sitting with, in my account at 85-1, maybe in Debo's account as well, because I was feeling the same way Debo was at the end of the game, to sort of have to see that ticket go by the wayside, along with some of the other really nice futures when it comes to the Bills and all of these other teams, obviously the 49ers as a whole being one of them.
Yeah, tough loss for the Niners. And I will say, after watching the Bengals win, there was a moment where I clicked. I was like, I could maybe see Jimmy Garoppolo having a shot against the Bengals. I did think that for a split second. But either way, we move on to the Super Bowl. And first look here, you got the Chiefs as 4-point favorites. The total is down to 48.5. To be honest, I need some time with this one. I'm not I don't have a side on this as of yet, because my whole thing is, as of now, I just know that putting the line right around that point, you're just trying to, everyone's waiting to bet on the Bengals. So an easy way to get all this Bengals money, right, to me, in my opinion, right? Yeah. It's going to be fun. Taking the underdogs, people like doing that. You're giving me over a field goal. People love doing that. It's an easy, quick first thing. Yep, Bengals, easy. And I don't want to do that. Okay. In terms of right now, I need some time. Right. I need some time. Right. I need some time. I need some time to lay this all out.
You get it for 2 weeks,
which I don't like. I don't like it. It's too much, way too much time before the Super Bowl comes around. But on a season that already feels so long already. But
yeah, I get it, man. I had to reintroduce myself to my family. I'm not thrilled about it either. Right. Hi, you guys are right. Okay. I got everybody's name down. Okay, cool. Yeah.
So obviously, as mentioned, right, we'll get in depth in a couple weeks for sure. But in terms of just the first look at things, what is the thing that stands out to you the most?
So I think it's a line that's sort of built off of a couple of things. One, this isn't why it exists the way that it does, but it is sort of nice that it's in a spot where you don't need to rush to grab it, right? We have talked a lot about sort of, sports betting content being a lot of, well, I grabbed plus 6.5 with the Raiders and on the open, and now it's 5.5, and so I can't tell you to bet it, right? Like that was week 1 essentially in the playoffs, where it was like, oh, congrats on the plus 6.5, but now you're kind of useless when it comes to giving anybody any guidance when it comes to that, right? And then, of course, that happened again the next week, and was probably happened last week, though I don't recall necessarily the lines getting all that crazy. But in this case, it's like, okay, the line opened 3.5, went to 4 very quickly. And honestly, I'm surprised to see this, but it's moving basically up to 4.5. And so I wrote about this early on in the week, or basically on Sunday night, that with the line being 4, without also sort of having not decided what I want to do just yet, but with the line being 4, if you want the Bengals, I would maybe just grab 4, because if it goes to 4.5, right, what's the actual literal difference? Well, if the game happens to land exactly on 4, okay, kind of a bummer, you push instead of winning, but you don't lose, right? You are not technically losing anything by getting 4 when, you could maybe get 4.5 throughout the week. But if you pass on the 4 and you wait and it goes down to 3.5 and the game lands 4, you do lose, right? You are losing on something. And now 4 isn't as popular, or isn't sort of as prevalent of a point spread, a finishing point spread, as it used to be. It is not the key number that it once was. And so the line is also built on something else, right? You and I, we talk every week, right, about a market number, right? Based on the point spreads that have been created and, been the through line of this entire season, and certainly towards the most recent point of the season, i.e. the Bengals being 7-point underdogs against the Chiefs, and the Rams being 3.5-point favorites against the 49ers. And as little as we agreed with that extra hook, somebody out there thought that was good enough, right? Because that number never came down to 3. So based on those numbers, on a neutral site, the Rams would be 2.5-point favorites against the Bengals. Now, immediately you're going to say to yourself, well, this, Matt, is not a neutral site. They are playing this for the second straight year after 4 years of never having a home Super Bowl. For the second straight year, we do technically have a home Super Bowl. And so this is where sort of the gray area comes in, because standard home field advantage in the regular season would be about 1.5 points. I have it a little bit less for the Rams, because that's, a lot of times they are not the home team, if you will, from a fan standpoint. We just saw that with San Francisco. We could see that with a bunch of teams that aren't the Cincinnati Bengals. But the problem here is this isn't a regular season game. This isn't even a playoff game. This is the Super Bowl. The tickets go corporate. They go expensive. They are a tough ticket to get. They are a tough ticket to buy, particularly if you are from again, not to generalize here, but Cincinnati, right? There will not be droves of people from Cincinnati going to LA there. And also the hardcore Rams fans will be priced out of this game as well. This will be a very neutral site game, to the point where I'm not really looking to give any home field advantage for the Rams. This isn't a situation where travel is an issue, because the Bengals are going to travel to LA early on the week because of all the media stuff that they're going to have to do, right? So they're going to be in town come Monday. So this is, so everything that makes a road game by and large, outside of just the literal flight, is going to be taken out of this game. So how much could you possibly use for home field advantage? So on the surface, I'm looking at this going, okay, you've got a 2.5-point spread. You have built in 1.5 points for home field advantage, and that's how you got to 4. But if I don't think there's home field advantage, shouldn't this line be 3 at the most? And so from a number standpoint, I'm very surprised to see this go from 4 to 4.5, because you're right. The Bengals should get a lot of attention. And normally we talk about sort of public teams and this or that. But honestly, we've got people out there, syndicates, etc., who are betting hundreds of thousands of dollars into a game. And so how many Joe Blows betting 50, 20, $100 are you going to need to offset that? The Super Bowl is the one game where everybody is betting on it, no matter whether there's value or anything like that. And like you said, they're going to look towards the underdog. Now you'll hear this, if you haven't already heard it 100 times in sports betting content, you'll hear this for the next 2 weeks. In these big games, same thing for the college football national championship game, right? If you are going to bet the underdog, people like betting the underdog to win outright. They want that last big, quote unquote, score, right? At plus 150, plus 170, something along those lines. They are going to pass on the points. The people who like the favorite are going to look at it and they're going to say, oh, 4 points, the Rams can win by 4 points. Give me the Rams -4, -4.5. And it's going to be that little range in the middle where the Rams money line starts to drop with the money that comes in on the Bengals money line. And so, yeah, you're still going to have to pay some juice, but you're not going to have to pay as much juice as you normally would for, in this case, a 4.5 point favorite. So I think we are going to see a Rams money line in certain books, and maybe it might take right up until kickoff, but you're eventually going to see something maybe in the -150s. Maybe -150 something, even -160 something. I even saw a -175 as recently as yesterday. Again, low limits, early. I mean, if you think it's early on in the week for a regular season game, obviously Super Bowl, we are really early on. So the limits will go up. And maybe that's the move too. Maybe this is an early limit, low limit situation where people are trying to get that extra half point. And we see some dummy bets here coming in where people bet -4, trying to get that line up to 4.5, so that when the market opens big time, then we see big time bets coming in on plus 4.5, because maybe they recognize that there shouldn't be any home field advantage built into this game. Now, all of that is based on sort of numbers and the idea that if you make this bet 1,000 times, you're going to end up 57%, as we try to be, right? Our aim is always 57%. Now, the problem is there's only one game. And it's the end of the season, right? So normally if this was week 2, we could say, well, if we're wrong about this, we have all season long, we'll end up getting them right more than we're going to get them wrong. But you sort of feel, oh, this is the last game of the season. You have to be right here, no matter kind of what the number looks like. And that's before we even get into the handicap of the game. Because again, all these point spreads are created against different matchups, and these two teams haven't met yet. And there's some pretty glaring theoretical mismatches here, i.e. the Bengals offensive line and the Rams defensive line. And is that enough of a matchup that doesn't exist in all these other combinations, all these other permutations? Is that enough of an issue that is going to make the Rams the right side in this game, right? Is that going to create something of a blowout effect here if Joe Burrow gets sacked 10 times and, all of that sort of thing? So that's the decision that needs to be made, because the value from again, the market standpoint of all season long is on the Bengals for now. We will see where that ends up 10, 12 days from now. But the handicap of the game, given that it's the last game of the season, matters more than it normally does, than just sort of systematically going through and picking out the numbers and where there's value, et cetera, et cetera.
No, that totally makes sense, man. And I look forward to the next week and a bit of deep diving in and figuring out some of the ins and outs, seeing where the value lies, because there'll be so many bets to make. But I also like exactly what you just said, honing in on just the game line and what that's going to be. Cause that's, I'm one of those people that I'm the Joe Blow that's going to be here waiting to be like, I need to make my last bet the best bet of the year. Want to be on the right side. So can't wait to deep dive and consume as much content as possible and be out here giving out more winners, because that's what we've been doing all year long and continue that throughout the playoffs as well. So as mentioned, we'll have more on that in the coming weeks. You'll see more episodes popping up in terms of getting you ready for the Super Bowl. But in the meantime, between time, I know you still have some stuff to hand out to the peoples on social media. Obviously, we're getting into college basketball. Where can the people find you to have all of that information, my dude?
Yeah, at MRuss Authentic on Twitter. Everything that I write over at the Score gets retweeted through there. One thing that I've already wrote about is I wrote about a long shot MVP bet that I think you might find at least worth a chuckle, if nothing else. 100-1 that's available out there. But I have bet Cooper Kupp plus 600. And I mentioned that here and I mentioned that now because that's one that I think could drop. I mentioned the Deebo Samuel concept of the 49ers and like how, he might overshadow the quarterback. think there's a decent chance Cooper Kupp overshadows his quarterback as well. We'll talk more about why that is, but at least at plus 600, that could drop because if there's more money that comes in on the Rams, the way that the point spread is working, right? That obviously makes them sort of probabilistically more likely to win the game, which means Rams MVP candidates start to drop in the marketplace because they become more probabilistically, did I add an extra syllable there? To win the MVP, right? The better chance they have to win the game, obviously, the better chance they have to win the MVP. Got a handful of plays ready for you on a Tuesday. I'm going to do them real quick here. Boston College plus 8.5 at Virginia. Creighton plus 9.5 at UConn. Duquesne plus 7.5 against Richmond. A lot of underdogs today. Not at Northwestern. Northwestern, I think, -5 is worth the play there against Rutgers. Iowa State plus 4.5 at home against Kansas. That line's moved up from 3 to 4.5. We're going to find ourselves getting value there with some Iowa State at Hilton. Maryland, home underdog to Michigan State, plus 4.5 as well. Texas A&M, plus 11.5 at Tennessee. Davidson, plus 3.5 at Bonaventure. Texas and Texas Tech, the big game of the night. Chris Beard's return with that big Texas team. He took the money and ran from Texas Tech. After all the success, the Final Four appearance, he said, see you later. I'm going down the road to Austin, taking the money. Well, this is his first return to Lubbock. That place is going to be bonkers. The problem is, how high do you make a point spread here for bonkers, right? Because the line is too high at 6. I'm going to take Texas here plus 6. I don't know if they're going to win the game, right? But we're getting a little extra value because of the concept that it is going to be insane. That is a game that you have to watch, even if you're not betting on it. And then finally, Providence, the road underdog at St. John's. I think they keep it rolling here on the road against the Johnnies. And then the one other game, Auburn, Alabama. I don't have a play for it, but that game was so much fun a couple of weeks ago in Alabama. Now it's in Auburn. Speaking of places that are going to be absolutely insane. So a really fun night of college basketball as we turn our attention to that going forward here a little bit. And I can't help but mention before I go, you use the term deep dive a couple of different times throughout this podcast. I'm just for the folks out there, I'm wondering if that's a bit of a hint as to what might be coming later on in the week, as far as maybe we hang out for a bonus episode and talk about something that maybe is not necessarily on people's radar. I don't know if that was a hint, but if that wasn't, I just gave one.
I guess that's a tease to pay attention to your podcast streams. Might be something more coming, but we'll find out. That was horrible, I know. But the point is, people, pay attention. We got more goodness coming, as always, on this DRF Sports Podcast. My guy, Matt Russell, thanks, as always, for stepping through and blessing us with the information.
Thanks, buddy. Anytime.
Thanks to Matt for coming on the pod. And if you want to follow me online, you can do so on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander and on Twitter at Shell Alexander. Don't forget to like and subscribe to DRF Sports Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also rate us, review us, like us, all that other fun stuff. But for more from this new project from DRF Sports, just a little reminder. If you're unfamiliar with the letters DRF, it stands for Daily Racing Forum, which has been around for over 100 years, giving you all of the horse racing information, data, and analysis. But now we've taken over the entire sports world. So if you want coverage on every football game, as well as the NBA, MLB, college sports, and more, head to drf.com/sports for all of the details and insights, as the site has all of the data on every game, including offensive and defensive stats, betting angles, line movements, key injuries, team stats, and more. The DRF data is what powers our power trends. So if you want to see which trends our analysts have selected, follow us on Instagram and on Twitter. If you want access to all of the raw data, drf.com/sports. That's where you can find the usual previews as we deep dive into the games. And of course, got you covered on this podcast. However you want your betting information, we've got you covered. Again, my name is Sheldon Alexander. We do this podcast twice a week on Tuesdays and on Fridays. That's all I got for now. But until next time, see ya.
Thanks for listening to the DRF Sports Podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show. For more sports betting advice, go to drf.com/sports and follow on Twitter at DRF_sports.